On this Wednesday night, Putin's latest threat. His warning to the West to keep out of the way or face the consequences as he halts gas supplies to two neighbors. Plus, a Ukrainian peace negotiator tells me why he keeps trying.
This is extremely hard.
Anguish for Canadian veterans who served in Afghanistan.
Admittedly, I regretted what I had done.
And their heartache for those left behind. Medical mystery, the surge in children with acute liver disease, the symptoms to watch for.
Global National with Dawna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Russia's president is issuing new threats and cutting off gas supplies to neighboring countries as Western countries appear more emboldened and are giving Ukraine more lethal weapons to defend itself. Shipments of Russian gas to Poland and Bulgaria, both NATO members, have stopped. And Vladimir Putin warned Western countries today to back off.
Что наш ответ на встречные удары.
They should know, Putin told lawmakers in St. Petersburg, that our retaliatory strikes will be lightning fast. Anyone, he said, who sets out to intervene in events from the outside and creates unacceptable threats for Russia will be hit with a quick-fire military response. We have all the tools for this, he claims, that no one else can boast of having. In Ukraine, there are reports of a tentative agreement to create safe passage for some of the hundreds believed to be sheltering in the besieged city of Mariupol. Ukrainian forces in that port city's massive steel plant are still said to be holding out, their situation rapidly deteriorating. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight.
Ukrainian rockets again fired at enemy targets in the Donbass on a day when Kyiv confirmed Russia had made more gains in the east of the country. And as a Ukrainian commander pleads for a Dunkirk-style evacuation for troops and civilians holed up inside Mariupol's Azovstal steelworks. Moscow, meanwhile, says there were explosions just inside the Russian border again, including at an arms depot. In peaceful Warsaw, the tentacles of this conflict were felt too. Russia halting natural gas exports to Poland and fellow NATO member Bulgaria because their gas payments were not made in rubles. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki says his country is prepared with strong reserves built up, but Bulgaria is scrambling, both countries seeking to stop relying on Russian gas by the end of the year.
Is another provocation from the Kremlin. But it comes as no surprise that the Kremlin uses fossil fuels to try to blackmail us.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says paying in rubles would breach sanctions. Hungary is already doing it, a victory of sorts for Vladimir Putin, now instigating a gas war to sow division within the West.
Für mich ist nur wichtig, dass Deutschland
Germany's economic minister insists it will not pay in rubles, but the industrial giant is hugely dependent on Russian gas with few alternatives in place.
This is the shocking fact. Germany is one of the most unprepared countries within the European Union, and it's almost inexplicable, either from a market or a political perspective.
Germany's energy vulnerability a factor in its delayed decision to send heavy weapons to Ukraine.
We have to admit we are facing war, and the war is beyond the war that is raging in Ukraine.
Some experts say Germany could face a significant recession if the gas supply ceases, but at least for now, the cost of this war in the West remains a purely economic one. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The House recognized that the Russian Federation is committing acts of genocide against the Ukrainian people.
Canadian MPs have voted unanimously to back an NDP motion calling Russia's attacks in Ukraine a genocide. It states there is clear evidence of massive war crimes taking place. The motion, though, is not binding and does not carry direct consequences under broader international law. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister today announced sanctions on more than 200 people loyal to Vladimir Putin and said Ottawa is working to reopen its embassy in Ukraine in the coming days. A little later, I speak with a Ukrainian MP who is part of the delegation negotiating with Russia while Russian troops attack his country. He explains how difficult that is and why he's doing it. But first, questions about a holiday Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took in 2016 have resurfaced. The federal Conservatives want the RCMP to reopen an investigation into the trip Trudeau and his family took to the Bahamas. They were guests of the Aga Khan. The Federal Ethics Commissioner ruled that breached conflict of interest rules because the Aga Khan's charity had received federal money. Well, now the Conservatives have documents they claim warrant a fresh police investigation. Our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, explains.
Dawna, the documents the Conservatives received include a long analysis RCMP investigators completed to determine if Prime Minister Justin Trudeau should face a criminal fraud charge.
In the House yesterday, the Prime Minister gave the RCMP the missing clue they need to begin a formal investigation into defrauding the government.
The RCMP documents explain that an individual who is a government official who receives a gift from someone who has business dealings with the government, and if that official fails to get permission from a supervisor, then a fraud has occurred. After a long investigation, the RCMP concluded that Trudeau was a government official, that his vacation on the Aga Khan's private island was a gift, and that the Aga Khan's Foundation was an organization that had business dealings with the government. But did Trudeau get written permission from anyone to take the trip? At the time, the RCMP said that was unknown. After all, since the Prime Minister is the head of government, who would have had the authority to give him permission? The RCMP never interviewed Trudeau at the time, and so no criminal charges were ever laid. But then on Tuesday,
did the Prime Minister give himself permission to get away with committing a criminal fraud offence?
No, Mr. Speaker.
The Conservatives now say if the RCMP had had that answer back in 2017 that no, he did not have written permission, that information might have led to a fraud charge.
This is very serious, Mr. Speaker. This is a big deal. The Prime Minister of Canada has potentially committed criminal offences.
The Ethics Commissioner ruled Trudeau did break ethics laws, 4 violations, in fact, of the Conflict of Interest Act. But Trudeau now dismisses the Tories' concerns as political theatre.
It's clear that the Conservative Party has run out of ideas and material when they choose to raise issues that were brought up by the Conservative leader 3 Conservative leaders ago.
As for the RCMP, well, it repeated today what it said when it finished its investigation in 2019, which is it could not productively pursue a viable criminal investigation. Dawna.
All right, David Aiken in Ottawa, thanks. The federal government is streamlining the immigration process to help resettle Ukrainian refugees, but the fate of thousands of Afghan refugees still hangs in the balance. During the last federal election campaign, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised to bring 40,000 Afghan refugees to Canada. About 11,000 have arrived. The Prime Minister blames the Taliban, though as Jeff Semple reports, Canadian veterans say the government needs to do more.
This reunion is 14 years in the making. Canadian Tim Laidler served in Afghanistan alongside his interpreter, Samander Passoon. When the Taliban took control last summer, Laidler helped Passoon's family escape and start a new life in Canada.
We have food, and our kids can go to school peacefully.
For the past 9 months, Laidler's charity has helped to evacuate more than 2,000 Afghans who supported Canada's military mission. But that lifeline is about to be cut short.
And it's just a bureaucratic nightmare for a lot of these families.
As of May 2nd, their evacuation campaign will end. The biggest barrier, he says, isn't the Taliban, it's Ottawa. With Canada's embassy in Kabul closed indefinitely, Afghans must first escape to a third country before booking a flight to Canada. But neighboring nations are reluctant to let them in.
He promised us that he'll take us.
Even veterans who fought the Taliban now believe it's time for Canada to recognize the regime and reopen our embassy.
I certainly think it's worth it. Let's do some sort of recognition, get our embassies reopened, and then at least we can support the tens of thousands of people we've promised to place here in Canada.
Don't forget us.
We're protecting the identity of this Afghan father because he worked for the Canadian military and is approved to come to Canada. He's been trying unsuccessfully for months to get a visa for Pakistan. He's afraid to leave his home and struggling to feed his family.
We really need their help to help us.
He used to work in Kandahar at Camp Nathan Smith, along with Canadian veteran Dave Ward. Global News first interviewed the retired sergeant back in November. He spent 2 decades with the military and described how difficult it was to watch Afghanistan fall. But we had no idea just how painful until Christmas Eve, when Ward put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger.
Immediately, I regretted what I had done.
The bullet tore through his jaw, cheek, and forehead. But incredibly, he survived.
I'm very happy to be alive.
He's now finding refuge in music, friends, and his faith, but says the trauma from his tour in Afghanistan is compounded by helplessness and fear for those left behind.
It's so hard for guys like us that are operationally ready that want to go and help innocent lives. You know, it doesn't get utilized, and you're just watching everything on TV, and it's hard, man.
I think it's a very common struggle for a lot of veterans.
Their evacuation's over. Laidler's charity is now returning to its original focus, supporting veterans' mental health. And these days, demand for their services is overwhelming. Jeff Semple, Global News, St. Catharines, Ontario.
Troubling trend coming up, what we're learning about a mysterious acute liver disease in children. Scientists are working hard to determine what's causing acute liver disease in some children, including here in Canada. Data from the World Health Organization shows at least 190 cases of severe liver disease have been identified in 11 countries. The largest number of cases are in the UK, but there are some reports of children in Canada also falling ill. Jamie Maracher explains how it's affecting kids and what researchers are watching for.
As families continue to try to steer clear of COVID-19, World Health officials are now also tracking a mystery illness causing hepatitis in kids.
The majority have diarrhea and vomiting, and few days to a few weeks later, they start developing the main symptom is jaundice, so their skin starts to turn yellow.
One child has died, officials haven't confirmed where, and 17 others have required liver transplants. What's missing is the cause. Doctors in Alabama treated a cluster of 9 severe cases.
Each one of them tested positive for adenovirus.
That's a common virus that can leave kids with a range of flu and cold-like symptoms. Some experts worry increased pandemic isolation has left kids with overactive immune responses to typical childhood illnesses. Others wonder if COVID-19 could play a more direct role.
That's certainly a possibility, but it's premature to put a stamp on that.
Links to the COVID-19 vaccines have been ruled out.
None of the children in the UK where this was first reported and where the most number of cases have been reported, none of them had received the COVID-19 vaccine.
Canadian officials aren't revealing much about the cases here, including how many they are investigating, where they are located, and whether they are linked to the infections abroad. The World Health Organization says it expects more cases will emerge, and with so many unanswered questions, surveillance is now a priority. Jamie Maracher, Global News, Toronto.
Is it possible to negotiate with a man like Vladimir Putin?
It is hard.
Ahead, insight from a Ukrainian MP trying to negotiate peace. Imagine you are part of the Ukrainian team negotiating with Russia when Russia is attacking your country and killing your people. That's what Rustam Umarov is doing. He's a Ukrainian MP and he's part of the delegation holding peace talks with Russia. He, along with Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich, suffered symptoms of suspected poisoning earlier this month after a meeting in Kyiv. I spoke to him earlier today from a location he preferred not to disclose. Mr. Umarov, thank you so much for taking time with us. I know that Ukraine wants this war to end, of course. The whole world does. Everyone wants peace. But after more than 2 months of an invasion, of terrible aggression, attacks on civilians, there's still no sign of peace. So do you have hope?
Well, we always have hope. We wanted the world to know that even though we are protecting the European security, or global security, we're able to negotiate for the peace because we understand that this war can bring more bloodshed to the region.
How do you sit at a table and have peace talks with the Russian side when so many Ukrainians are being killed?
This is extremely hard emotionally, physically, but because we know that if it will continue, it will kill more people, we assume that we are wartime peace envoys. So that is why we have to take it into consideration that if we don't sit, we don't negotiate, we don't find a solution, it will continue. So that is why we have to take it serious, and we take it as our job.
Is it possible to negotiate with a man like Vladimir Putin? I know you're not in the room with him, but he is most definitely in charge.
It is hard because he tries to open up several verticals, which means that legally when you negotiate with on one topic, you constantly are fighting back in the field. In addition, he goes and fights you in the media. So basically, there are up to 5-6 different dimensions that you have to fight. The decision is only in his head. So the only person who can stop this bloodshed is Vladimir Putin.
The West is, of course, providing more lethal weapons, more every day. The rhetoric, too, is ramping up. The U.S. Defense Secretary says he wants Russia weakened. Russia's foreign minister says the West is waging a proxy war against Russia and warns of provoking World War III. What do you read into all that, and how worried should the world be?
Well, the world should definitely be worried. Why? Because the war already started. So every person who is not involved at this stage should be thinking that it helps then Russia if it is not involved in finishing the war. On the supply side, we appreciate Canada's support for $500 million support they provided, and now they will be providing some APCs, armored vehicles. We appreciate it.
Do you think that Canada has done enough and has acted fast enough?
Canada is active. Canada is helping diplomatically, politically. Nevertheless, the speed is extremely important. So we need to supply as much equipment as we can. Otherwise, this may become a beginning of Third World War.
Is there a line that Russia crosses where you say, okay, we're done, we're not talking anymore?
No, there are, of course, red lines that we are not going to cross, which means that our president told that if people in Mariupol, Azovstal steel plant will be killed, this is a red line for us, which means that we will be exiting from negotiations. I would like to say to the whole world that Ukraine is working on evacuation of their citizens, of all categories of people, including wounded soldiers. And it is extremely hard. We're trying our best. We're putting all efforts that are in our hands. And that is the signal to all world that we will not leave our people.
Ukrainian peace negotiator and MP Rustam Umarov, thanks. Hockey history scored next. The Leafs player joining the greats with a major milestone. If you're a Canadian sports fan, you probably like what you're seeing right now. The Blue Jays are back in the swing of things. The Raptors made it to Game 6. And last night, Austin Matthews became the first Toronto Maple Leaf player to score 60 goals in a season. At a time of year when the hearts of Toronto sports fans are often broken, is there a reason for optimism? Eric Sorensen explores the eternal question.
Dawna, it's an extraordinary moment for Toronto's three major sports franchises, the Leafs, the Raptors, and the Blue Jays. Starting last night with the Blue Jays, they did it again. A home run in the bottom of the ninth inning to tie the game, and one run in the 10th to seal another heart-stopping victory. The Jays, for many, a genuine favorite to go to the World Series. The Raptors just keep surprising, and now in the first round of the playoffs, they've put a top contender, Philadelphia, on notice, coming from 3 games down with a chance to tie the series in in Toronto tomorrow. And then there are the Leafs. I know, this is the time of year when their hopes are always dashed. But this year, they have something special.
And they have someone special. Austin Matthews, the first Toronto Maple Leaf to score 60. Hands so quick and a rare gift for stick handling, checking, and scoring. 60 goals in a season were first scored in the 1970s by Phil Esposito, then others. The 80s, the goal-scoring era, peaked with the likes of Wayne Gretzky and Mike Bossy. In the 90s, 12 more times 60 goals were scored. But it became rare. Just once in the 2000s, once more in 2012, and now 10 years later, Austin Matthews, in this era, a remarkable milestone.
You just know how hard it is to score in this league.
Matthews may be the most valuable player in hockey this year.
The reception from my teammates, the crowd, I mean, everything, it just, it just kind of sends chills down your bones.
The Leafs carry the heavy burden of past disappointments.
All that's not going to really mean much if the team can't make a deep run into the Stanley Cup playoffs. If the team is able to do that, then we'll really see the city catch fire.
At this moment, spirits are high for their sports teams in Toronto.
We got the Jays doing pretty well. We got the Raps hopefully going to Game 7 winning it. And then you got the Leafs that are going to win the Cup this year, hopefully.
So you have the Blue Jays playing down the street this evening, and the Raptors are here tomorrow night, and the Leafs on Friday night, and the playoffs start next week. It can't last. Can it? Dawna?
Of course it can. Eric Sorensen in Toronto, thanks. That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Dawna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Manitoba's Whiteshell Provincial Park. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.